Pride and Prejudice, and Praise and Porridge, and Presents, and Pedantic Ponies, and Pride and Pride and Pride and Proud and Pride, and a little bit of hot sex. By Jane Austen. Chapter 2. After sitting a little with Jane on Miss Bingley's face, Mr. Collins, awkward and solemn and frightened of God, stood by Elizabeth for some minutes in silence, and at last whispered, "If I," said Mr. Collins, "let Mr. Darcy see my old wide behind, I should have great pleasure, I am sure, in obliging the Count, for I consider the rectum of a clergyman as a very innocent perversion, and I do not think it of light importance that he should have general inspection of my tender, short, active, useful sort of penis, which, as I have already said, is seriously pointy. I shall entreat his pardon for not having done it earlier. I believe him to be a simpleton, and perhaps he might give me £40,000 in the Forbes Inn, and perhaps he might give me a sheet of paper with some drawings of Father Christmas sharing the same mince pie, the food of love, with Lady Catherine de Bourgh, drawn as a horsewoman with a large sword. That is not very likely." Elizabeth tried hard to dissuade him from such a scheme, assuring him that Mr. Darcy would consider his genitals offensive rather than a compliment to his Willie. But alas, he had already taken the end of the dick out in the most serious manner. This roused a general astonishment, and he had the pleasure of being gay. Kitty stared at him, and Lydia exclaimed, "Oh, no." "Oh, yes," replied Mr. Collins. "Oh, no," said Elizabeth. "Oh, yes," said he. After amusing himself some time with masturbation, Mr. Collins had followed his nice through the hall towards Mr. Darcy. Her cousin prefaced his speech with a solemn bow, and though she could not hear a word of it, she saw in the motion of his lips the words apology, intercourse, circumcised, cheeks, tackle, do the business, and Lady Catherine de Bourgh. It vexed her to see him expose himself to such a man. "You need not undress yourself," said Mr. Darcy, looking at the little cock face. "I am not in a humour to wait for an opening of yours. You are tolerable, but not handsome enough to tempt me. Your portion is unhappily so small that it will in all likelihood undo the effects of your loveliness and amiable qualifications, of which you have fuck all. Believe me, my dear Mr. Farty, third person," said Mr. Collins very gravely, "you could not have met with a person more capable of giving you head than myself, for I drink a bottle of wine every day, mixed with sprog. But before I am run away with by my want of penetration, perhaps it would be advisable for me to state my reasons for my desire of being loved by your long satisfactory particulars." Mr. Darcy felt his own arse, and immediately said, "I beg you would not put my little lizard into your hole of love. Heaven forbid! As you are as handsome as a pack of foxhounds, that would be insupportable. But, however, you may suck my hearty cock of temptation from the bewitching testes, so remarkably fine, finer finery than the finest fruits in season, to the Archbishop of Stiffness, Mr. Cockings." This was invitation enough. Lydia gaped as he opened the fly. Dear me, I never saw such a long, unbending erection in my life. And Mrs. Hurst, principally occupied in playing with her bosoms and rings, looked eagerly round the room, and covering her face with her handkerchief, she turned from sister to sister, demanding their congratulations, and when at length they all sat down, she observed with a laugh that they all sat down. Elizabeth was delighted. She had never seen a prick for which nature had done more, or where natural beauty had been so little counteracted by an awkward tattoo. Its balls were neither formal nor falsely adorned. To be sure, it was a beautiful object, and the ladies all felt that he must wee a little further than other rich men. Elizabeth, after slightly surveying it, went to a window to enjoy it 3 or 4 healthful and lovely farties, which naturally led to the death of half the good people in Meryton, with no expectation of pleasure, but just done to give pleasure to Miss Darcy. Mr. Collins put his lips violently between the 2 beautiful work-bags which were slightly colouring. This was exactly as it should be. Both changed colour. One looked white, the other red. A redness at the same time perfectly correct and unassuming, and red. "I have seen them both," cried he, with an air of awkward gallantry. and after giving each of them a hasty kiss, he began tending to them in every way, teaching them, playing with them, and loving them. But his friend Mr. Darcy said, with a look of haughty composure, "You want the girls, you get my dick, you want a wife, but you are a frack-wit, suck my balls, Church of England cunt. What a fuck-go, fuck your mother's ass twice." But alas, Mr. Collins's mouth was too full for conversation, and wholly engrossed by his mouth being so full of balls, sucked them in silence. "How nicely they are crammed in," cried Lydia. "Come, Darcy," cried Bingley, "I must have you come. I hate to see you standing about with no come in this stupid manner. You had much better come." "I certainly shall not." "Oh," he replied, biting his lips, "you know how I detest it." "Oh, unless I am particularly acquainted with my yes, partner. Oh, at such an assembly as this it would, good God, be insupportable." He proceeded to burst forth all over Mr. Collins, covering him with white soup, with many rapturous expressions, and, after discharging his keenness on that head, admitted a most refreshing fart. The scent quickly spread through the drawing-room, and with proportionate speed through the house, and instead of entering the park, turned up the lane, past one of the gates into the village, and did much good among the poor. Mr. Collins bowed and smiled like a stupid, bloody mother-fucking ass-faced cunt. "I have been most highly gratified indeed, my dear sir," said he. But Mr. Darcy had walked away to another part of the room, and now nothing remains for me but to fuck myself in the most animated manner. But a deeper shade of hauteur overspread his features before he had advanced many steps, and from actual weakness sat down and cried for half an hour. "I'm cruelly used. Nobody feels for my poor pathetic, paler than usual penis, not to mention my neglected anal passage. Oh, how I wanted you! 6 inches deep in my aunt's cheeks. Look here," cried Miss Elizabeth, shaking her head. "There is a fine old saying, which everybody here is of course familiar with, 'Keep your breath to cool your coffee and muffins,' and I shall keep mine to swell my salad and cucumber. So fuck off."